You think you're alone in your living room, maybe scrolling through your phone, right? Or that your smart speaker is just sitting there quiet, waiting for you to say something. But what if those everyday objects, the ones you actually invited into your most private spaces, what if they're quietly, constantly collecting data about your life? We've all been there, haven't we? Clicking I agree on some update or app install without really reading the fine print because honestly, who has the time? But in that simple act, that quick click, you might have just opened the door to, well, something else entirely. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the surprising and frankly, yeah, a little unnerving world of ubiquitous surveillance. We've pulled together a stack of insights from various sources, everything from like hacker warnings to analyses of urban surveillance systems to really unpack how you might be watched, listened to, and maybe even seen right now, often without you even knowing it.
Yeah. And our mission today really is to try and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from all these different perspectives. We want to help you understand not just what is happening around you in this, increasingly connected world, but why it matters so profoundly for your personal privacy.
Yeah.
What becomes startlingly clear when you look at these sources is just how commonplace these technologies have become. It's transforming privacy from something we used to maybe take for granted and assumed right into a concept that now requires active, like vigilant effort just to maintain. And this really isn't about paranoia. It's just the new baseline. It's where we are now.
Okay, so let's start with a pretty chilling premise that seems to echo across a lot of our sources. Basically, the idea is that almost anything with a battery and some kind of connection, any device that can remotely send or receive data, it's either hackable or honestly, it's probably already been hacked. And we're not just talking about the obvious things like your laptop or your phone. We're talking about the very fabric of our connected lives. Things like your smart thermostat, maybe your projector, audio devices, ceiling fans, even like the access control badges you use at work or the key fobs for parking gates. It seems like it's everything that's digitally connected around you. So what's the fundamental reason? Like at a foundational level, why are so many of these seemingly harmless devices inherently vulnerable, basically right out of the box?
That's a really critical point. And it digs deep into this pervasive reality of the Internet of Things, or IoT as everyone calls it. We're talking about, ubiquitous physical objects, your fridge, your smart speaker, your light bulbs, all embedded with chips, all connected to the internet. It essentially turns every mundane item into a little data spigot, constantly collecting or transmitting something. Now, on one hand, this interconnectedness offers undeniably a lot of convenience and efficiency. It can streamline our lives in countless ways. Think about your smart home adjusting the lights and temperature for you automatically. It's nice. But, and this is the big but, every single one of these connections creates what one source called a very attractive nuisance for hackers. It's just another potential way in. And our sources highlight a really profound, almost, disturbing truth here. One analysis stated that what big tech has created in surveillance capitalism is more pervasive and more intrusive than anything you could ever possibly, it's more pervasive than Marcus Wolf of the Stasi or Beria of the KGB could ever possibly achieve, which is a massive claim, right? The chilling insight there isn't just about the volume of data being collected, but the nature of it. Unlike, say, state surveillance, which often targets specific individuals or threats, surveillance capitalism aims to create this exhaustive, predictive profile of everyone. It's like building a digital twin of you, constantly updated, bought and sold, primarily to influence behavior. And that creates vulnerabilities far beyond anything historical intelligence agencies could even dream of. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, legally speaking, a lot of this data that's collected by private companies, well, it often doesn't receive privacy protection under the Fourth Amendment in the U.S. The amendment protecting against unreasonable searches and seizures by the government, it just doesn't apply in the same way to data collected by private companies that we might expect or, frankly, like to see. It leaves this huge legal gray area, a lot of uncertainty about our actual digital rights.
Okay, so building on that idea of pervasive vulnerability, where do we see this playing out most directly in our day-to-day lives? Maybe like something as common as the TV in our living room.
Absolutely. The smart TV is a perfect prime example. It sits right there in the heart of your home. Do you remember back in, 2015? When Samsung quietly updated their smart TV manual, it wasn't buried in technical specs or battery advice. It was this single, stark sentence. It said, if your spoken words include personal or other sensitive information, that information will be among the data captured and transmitted.
Sure.
Think about that. This wasn't them warning about a bug or a glitch. It was a candid admission. It was how their tech was designed to function. They were essentially legally disclosing behavior they knew, or must have known, would raise some serious questions.
And it definitely did raise questions, didn't it? The story, as our sources lay it out, it just exploded after The Guardian picked it up.
So I said, yeah, it blew up. The Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPC, they moved fast. They filed a formal complaint with the FTC. They accused Samsung of collecting voice data without proper disclosure and, crucially, without clear, informed consent from users. Then the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the EFF, they went even further. They drew comparisons to something straight out of 1984, Orwellian, basically. And their warning was pretty unequivocal. Don't talk about personal matters near your television ever, just flat out. Now, here's a really striking technical detail that our sources revealed about how this works under the hood. If you try to disable the voice command feature, you might see the little microphone icon disappear from your remote or the screen. It looks like it's off. The sources confirm this is often just for show. Yeah. What you actually disabled isn't the microphone hardware itself. It's merely the trigger that makes the voice commands initiate a visible action on the TV. The underlying hardware, it stays active. The logs, they keep building up in the background. And that little LED light, the one that maybe blinks to show the mic, is active.
Often, that's just for show, too. It can be controlled by software. Plus, many smart remotes now include something called wake word detection. That means the microphone is essentially always on standby, constantly listening for a command word like, "Hey Google," or "Alexa." So this raises a really fundamental question, doesn't it? If a device can hear you, even when you're not speaking directly to it, or maybe even when you think you've turned the listening feature off, who is it truly designed to serve? Is it really for your convenience, or is it primarily for the relentless collection of data?
That is incredibly unsettling. The thought that a simple indicator light could just be, a false sense of security. And it actually goes beyond just the audio aspect, doesn't it? What about smart TVs that actually come equipped with cameras, like some of the newer Facebook Portal devices, or maybe those Amazon Alexa devices with screens and cameras integrated? Our sources pointed to this one cybersecurity expert's demonstration. It was quite stark. He showed how he could invisibly hijack a TV's webcam. He explained that with just a little bit of extra code, they could activate the camera right in your browser. And while his demo made it obvious, for teaching purposes, he stressed it could be done completely invisibly, just running quietly behind whatever web page you happen to be looking at. And what's really unsettling is the potential reach. He said he could be sitting on his laptop in a cafe, say, in Paris, and as long as he had a network connection, he could potentially get into your TV back home and access that camera. The really scary thing about it, he noted, is that it doesn't actually give any indication that the camera's on. There's no little LED that shows up when the camera's on. So it could literally be watching you, capturing moments of your private life, and you would have absolutely no idea. It really drives home why simple physical measures like covering camera lenses and maybe even microphone holes, and perhaps even unplugging these smart devices when you really want them off, why that's actually crucial.
Exactly. And this brings us neatly to something called automatic content recognition, or ACR. This technology really forms the backbone of a lot of this TV-based surveillance. ACR isn't just about logging what you stream from, say, Netflix or Disney Plus or YouTube. That's part of it, sure. But it scans everything that appears on your screen, even content coming through the HDMI inputs from your external devices.
Wait, even HDMI? So like my gaming console or Blu-ray player?
Precisely. Your game console, Blu-ray player, cable box, anything connected via HDMI. It works by fingerprinting each frame. It creates this unique digital signature for whatever content you're watching. And then it tracks how long you watch, when you pause, what you skip, all those little viewing habits. And then it quietly sends all of that incredibly detailed data out. And importantly, it's not just going back to the TV manufacturer. Often it's being transmitted directly to third-party servers, advertisers, and data brokers who are paying for access to your habits. Awesome. Most of the time, this ACR stuff is running silently in the background. It might be buried deep within settings menus you'd probably never even think to look for. Or even more often, it's just enabled by default, maybe with a vague opt-in buried in that initial setup process you click through quickly. There was a really concrete and significant example of this back in 2017. Vizio got hit with a pretty hefty fine, $2.2 million by the FTC. Why? For secretly using ACR to spy on over 11 million TVs. Users weren't explicitly warned about this data collection, and the setting was enabled by default. It was effectively ripping viewing data straight from people's living rooms without a single word of genuine, clear disclosure. And if we connect this to the bigger picture today, many modern TVs still ship with ACR enabled by default. It's still happening. Some even have cameras and mics that are technically controlled through menus, but the labels might be really vague, like
experience enhancement or personalized ads, subtly masking their true surveillance function. It really highlights why that simple protective measure you mentioned, basic as it sounds, is so vital. Physically covering cameras and mic holes. And maybe actually unplugging smart devices if you want them truly completely offline. Because most people never really turn them off in that background data collection sense. They don't even know they're still on.
Right. That concept of convenience being a kind of Trojan horse. Now it's becoming clearer and clearer. Okay, so let's transition now to the one device that, for most of us, truly never leaves our side, our mobile phone. It's our alarm clock, our camera, our bank, our map. It feels like it's our everything, right? But underneath all that amazing convenience is arguably the most advanced, most pervasive tracking system you've ever owned. And here's the real kicker. You carry it around willingly. You don't even need to open an app. You don't need to touch it for it to be, well, working for someone else in the background.
That's absolutely right. Your phone is collecting data all the time, whether it's physically in your hand, charging on your nightstand overnight, or even just stuffed in a drawer somewhere. Our sources highlighted this really fascinating study. It found a significant spike of data leaving the phone around 3 a.m. We're talking about 50 megabytes worth, roughly. And this is, as one source vividly put it, basically that phone dialing home to the mothership, exporting all of your goings-on, all your pillow talk. We tend to think of our phones as these passive tools, just waiting for our input. But they're profoundly active. They watch, they listen, they learn, they predict. It's almost become a common joke now, hasn't it? You hear people say, my phone must have heard me talking about that, when an ad suddenly pops up seconds after a private conversation.
Oh, yeah, all the time. You talk about needing new shoes, suddenly shoe ads everywhere.
That's exactly. You mentioned a vacation spot or a new gadget you're thinking about. Bam, the ads appear. But the striking thing is, as one source noted, quote, when thousands, maybe millions of people experience this, maybe it's not a joke at all. And it's not just about what you say near the phone. It's your movements throughout the day tracked by GPS and cell towers. It's your browsing habits, the apps you use, how long you use them. Even the way you swipe and tap on the screen can be analyzed. Everything contributes to building this incredibly detailed fingerprint of your behavior. It's essentially a digital version of you, constantly being tracked, analyzed, bought, and sold, often without your explicit permission or even awareness. This is why some sources suggest that services like Incon, which specialize in finding and removing your personal data from the hundreds, maybe thousands of data brokers out there, why those services can be a potentially beneficial step in trying to reclaim at least some semblance of digital privacy in this environment.
And it's not just the legitimate companies or the data brokers collecting all this information, right? There's a huge vulnerability just in the apps we download ourselves, especially free apps. They often look like harmless games or utilities, but frequently they're quietly logging your GPS data in the background, maybe accessing your contacts list, or even activating your microphone. And they sell this intimate data off to advertisers, or much worse, maybe to malicious actors, to hackers. Many of these are what are called Trojanized apps. They hide these sophisticated backdoors that are designed to stream your audio or track your movements in real time. It basically makes your phone a constant, unwitting spy in your pocket. How do we even begin to protect ourselves from these kinds of hidden threats, especially when they seem so interwoven with the apps we kind of rely on every day?
That really raises a profoundly important question for every single smartphone user out there. And the first line of defense, honestly, is one that's often overlooked. Consistently auditing your app permissions. Actually go into your phone's settings menu and review exactly what each app is allowed to access. Ask yourself, does that simple flashlight app really need access to my microphone or my contacts list? Probably not. Be critical about those permissions. And crucially, only install apps from trusted official sources. That means Google Play Protect for Android devices and Apple's App Store for iPhones. These platforms have built-in security checks and review processes. Now, they're not infallible, things can slip through, but they are significantly safer. Actively avoiding third-party app stores or worse, direct downloads from random websites dramatically mitigates the risk of inadvertently installing malicious software that could easily turn your phone into a powerful, always-on surveillance device without you ever knowing it happened.
Okay, let's unpack this even further then. We've looked at the more obvious digital eavesdroppers, the TV, the phone, but what about the really quiet, everyday objects? The ones we barely even register as technology sometimes, but are now apparently being weaponized. Let's peel back the layers on seemingly innocuous items like, say, your phone charger cable or your smart light bulbs, even those USB wall outlets. These things are literally designed to blend into our homes, which makes them sort of perfect Trojan horses, doesn't it?
Indeed. The level of hidden sophistication that can be packed into plain sight now is, well, it's truly unsettling when you dig into it. Take, for instance, something called the OMG cable. Now, this looks, feels, and functions exactly like an ordinary charging cable, like a standard Apple Lightning cable or a USB-C cable. It would be indistinguishable from any legitimate one you might buy from a reputable brand. But our sources reveal that devices like these, potentially developed by or for agencies like the NSA, reportedly sell for astonishing amounts, maybe up to $20,000. The core insight here is what's hidden inside. Inside that tiny plastic casing at the end of the cable, there's a fully functional Wi-Fi chip and a miniature computer. So this device doesn't just charge your phone, it can actually emulate a keyboard and can type at an incredible speed of 860 characters per second into any device it's connected to.
860 characters a second.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's incredibly fast. It's not just a theoretical hacker tool, it is a pre-packaged, almost off-the-shelf hacking device. And astonishingly, according to some sources, they are sold online to anyone who knows where to look. So you could plug it into a USB-C port on your laptop or your phone. You would charge your device perfectly normally. You wouldn't notice anything amiss. But while it's connected, it can covertly create its own Wi-Fi network. This allows a hacker nearby, or potentially even remotely if configured, to connect to the cable itself. From there, they can load a malicious payload like commands or malware and instantly execute those commands on your device. And what's even more chilling, according to the research, is that it doesn't even need to stay plugged in continuously to remain a threat. It apparently works even after it's unplugged because it has a tiny onboard chip that can store commands or log data and then continue to transmit that data or execute commands over Wi-Fi later when it gets power again, or perhaps has a small battery. The creator of the original concept confirmed that modified versions have been successfully tested on iPhones, Androids, Windows laptops, and even car diagnostic systems, which just highlights how broadly applicable this kind of attack vector is. And the attack itself happens instantly, often before you realize anything's off. It just silently slips past your defenses while you think you're just charging your phone. It's a truly chilling example of these hidden threats embedded in the most mundane, everyday objects, turning convenience into a potentially profound vulnerability.
Okay, if a single charging cable can pack that kind of hidden punch, what about something even simpler, even more benign seeming, like a smart light bulb? You screw it into a lamp, you open an app on your phone, and suddenly your room is bathed in cool blue light. Maybe it's synced to your music playlist, setting the perfect mood. It seems all about comfort and convenience, right? But our sources are warning that every single one of those smart bulbs is also a potential entry point into your home network. It's like an unexpected backdoor right into your digital life.
It's an alarming truth, isn't it? A light bulb fundamentally shouldn't need Wi-Fi, but the moment it does, it immediately becomes a target, a potential node for someone seeking access to your network. Our sources detail how a standard smart bulb can actually be hijacked. Once compromised, it could potentially be used to monitor your network traffic, maybe even steal your Wi-Fi password, and other network credentials stored insecurely on the bulb itself. As soon as that bulb receives power and connects to your network, it can subtly establish its own hidden network channel or exploit known vulnerabilities in its communication protocols to connect back out. From that compromised position, it doesn't just pull data from your Wi-Fi instructions. It could potentially analyze traffic, log what's happening in your system, maybe map out other devices on your network, and it could even act as a launch pad for further attacks, a pivot point to get deeper into your home network, maybe targeting your router or other connected devices. There's a particularly striking example of this highlighted by Checkpoint Research back in 2020. They exposed a critical vulnerability in Philips Hue smart bulbs. By compromising just a single bulb, using the Zigbee protocol, that's a popular low-power wireless standard used in many smart home devices, known for its mesh networking capabilities.
Zigbee? Right, I've heard of that. Allows devices to talk to each other directly.
Exactly. It creates a mesh, so devices relay signals. But that mesh capability can also be a weakness. An attacker could infect that initial bulb, often through a proximity attack. The vulnerability often lies in how Zigbee handles network joining or firmware updates. From that single compromised bulb, the attack could then jump potentially to the central lighting hub or bridge device. Then maybe from the hub to the user's phone app that controls it, and finally into the Wi-Fi router itself. Think about that chain. From a mood light to a full network access in just a few silent hops. And this case really highlights a general security flaw that's unfortunately prevalent across many smart home devices, not just light bulbs. Most tend to ship with weak or no encryption on their local communications. Some use outdated wireless protocols with known vulnerabilities, and they often retain your network credentials, like your Wi-Fi password, sometimes even after you try to reset them, because the priority is always making setup easy and convenient for the user, often at the expense of robust security. So yeah, your light bulb might be subtly flashing signals or data to someone who isn't you, acting as a silent gateway into your network, entirely unbeknownst to you.
Wow. Okay, so if a light bulb, something that's only supposed to glow, can be turned into a network backdoor, what about something even more invisible? Something that's literally hiding inside the walls themselves, something that's utterly integrated into modern infrastructure. I'm thinking about those sleek, modern USB wall outlets that you see popping up everywhere now. In hotels, airports, coffee shops, and increasingly in new homes and office renovations. You just think they're there to give your phone a quick power boost, a moment of charging convenience. But sometimes, according to our sources, they might be doing something else entirely.
Yeah, those ports are designed fundamentally to transfer data as well as power. That's the standard for USB. And unfortunately, malicious actors have figured out exactly how to exploit that inherent dual functionality. The cybersecurity world has a chilling name for this specific threat: juice jacking. It sounds almost playful, but it's not. It's a deceptive method where malware is secretly delivered through a USB port when you plug in your device, just looking for a charge. Once your phone or tablet is connected to a compromised port, it can silently install spyware, skim data like passwords or contacts, even take remote control of your phone. And this all happens while it's charging like normal, giving you absolutely no visible indication that anything nefarious is going on. The early warnings about juice jacking surfaced way back in 2016, coming from reputable organizations like the SANS Institute and even the NSA. At that time, the concern was mostly focused on those shady-looking public charging stations you might see in high-traffic areas like airports or malls. But by 2023, the threat was considered serious enough that the FBI escalated these warnings. They released official public advisories, urging travelers to actively avoid using public USB outlets altogether.
The FBI actually said avoid them completely.
Yes, avoid them in airports, hotels, shopping centers, basically anywhere a port could have been physically tampered with or replaced with a malicious version. But what's even more concerning now, and this is a key insight from our sources, is that now that same attack vector is moving into private homes. Our sources reveal that some smart USB wall outlets sold online, often unbranded or from questionable sources, come preloaded with malicious firmware right out of the factory. Once these compromised outlets are installed behind your wall panel wired directly into your home's electrical system, they become almost impossible to detect through conventional security scans. And chillingly, there's no way to unplug them easily once they're physically installed in the wall. You'd have to physically remove the outlet. This raises a profoundly important question for modern living, doesn't it? How do you secure your home when the very infrastructure of convenience, the wall outlet itself, can be weaponized against you, when it can become this persistent, undetectable point of entry for surveillance or malicious activity right inside your own walls?
That is a truly insidious threat. The idea of an invisible, unwired entry point right there in your own wall.
Yeah. But okay, not every threat hides in hardware that you physically plug in or install. Some don't need to be installed in your wall at all. Sometimes just one click online, maybe not even a click, and they're already inside your device. You might think you're being safe, maybe clicking a link or visiting a website, even using your browser's private mode or incognito mode. But as we know, private doesn't necessarily mean anonymous or secure. And in that moment, you might be inviting more than just a video to play or an article to load. That click could trigger keyloggers and trackers to slip quietly into your device, starting to build this digital dossier on you, totally in the shadows.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just theoretical, it's actively happening all the time. Researchers from major cybersecurity firms like Norton Labs and McAfee have documented extensive cases of malware distribution, particularly through adult websites. This malware is often disguised cleverly, maybe as required video enhancements, special codecs you supposedly need to install, or just innocuous-looking browser plugins. Once installed, these insidious programs can remain hidden, dormant sometimes for weeks or months, silently tracking your keystrokes, logging your browsing history, and crucially even monitoring your activity when you're using those so-called incognito or private browsing tabs. That moment of supposed privacy can quickly become a publicly exploitable record. The late John McAfee, who's certainly a controversial figure but undeniably insightful about cybersecurity threats, he vividly detailed how this works. He described sophisticated scripts, often embedded in the advertising networks used by some of these sites, that can silently download things like modified Android browsers onto your systems. Or they could remotely root iPhones, essentially jailbreaking them without your knowledge, and install keyloggers in a matter of seconds, often without any user interaction beyond just visiting the site.
Without even clicking anything, just visiting the page.
In some cases, yes. Drive-by downloads or malicious ad redirects can trigger these actions. McAfee pointed out the underlying economics. These major sites cost millions to build and maintain, yet users typically don't pay directly for access. The payment, he argued, comes the instant you visit, often through this data harvesting or malware delivery without your explicit knowledge or consent. For Android users, for example, the site might run some JavaScript that exploits a browser vulnerability to set a flag, allowing an unauthorized app download, completely bypassing the usual security prompts. For iPhones, maybe the very first video you click triggers a payload that attempts a remote rooting function or exploits a known vulnerability to install a keylogger or spyware. From that point on, someone, somewhere, is potentially watching every single one of your keystrokes, every username, every password, every private message you type. McAfee's chilling prediction, based on his insights, was that hackers often don't act immediately on this stolen data. They patiently wait, they aggregate, they won't just drain a few hundred bank accounts right away. Instead, he warned, they might wait until one day this year or next year, and 100 million people in one day are going to have your bank accounts eradicated, zero balance. Or your identity will be stolen, or your Bitcoin wallet will be emptied. A coordinated mass attack. Or perhaps even more sinister, maybe they've just been watching your keystrokes to see if you're saying something incriminating or embarrassing to a friend or lover, something that could compromise you. That could lead to blackmail. And if they get really lucky, McAfee speculated, you might even be a United States congressman or senator. In which case, they now potentially have not just money, but actual political power over you through this silently gathered information. There was also a significant academic study published in New Media and Society back in 2019 that analyzed this. It found that a staggering 93% of adult sites share user data with third parties. And this happens even when users believe they're operating undercover in privacy mode. These aren't just benign tracking cookies for ads either. Many of these sites deploy aggressive JavaScript that can deliver key logging software and tracking pixels without requiring any clicks or downloads from the user. The study noted that Android users seem especially vulnerable because certain mobile browsers permit these silent downloads in the background, meaning JavaScript can bypass security prompts and install malicious components instantly. So, all you might need to do is visit one compromised site, maybe make one casual click, maybe not even that. And everything you type from then on, account info, private messages, personal searches, could potentially be scooped up in the background. The unavoidable result is this trail of digital breadcrumbs that leaves you exposed well after you've closed the tab and left the website. As one source summed it up, you thought you bought convenience, but what you really got was a network of quiet observers, each one logging, syncing, and transmitting your digital life.
Okay, wow. We've really peeled back the layers there on the digital observers hiding in plain sight, within our homes and on our personal devices. Now, let's try and shift our focus a bit, moving from those intimate private spaces to the broader surveillance infrastructure that exists out in public spaces. Because as you just walk through any public area, any city street, data is being collected about people constantly, all the time, in all sorts of different forms, and it's often happening invisibly unless you really know what to look for or maybe what questions you should be asking.
Indeed. And one of the most striking revelations that comes through in our sources is just the sheer scale and, importantly, the integration of these public surveillance systems now. Take, for example, the Domain Awareness System, or DAS, that operates in cities like New York. This system was developed by the NYPD, actually in collaboration with Microsoft, and it launched way back in 2012. It's been around a while. What it does is it pulls in feeds from thousands of surveillance cameras, and that includes not just police-owned cameras, but also feeds from some private cameras contributed by businesses or even individuals who opt in. But it doesn't stop with cameras. The DAS also seamlessly integrates data from automated license plate readers, or ALPRs, which we can talk more about. It pulls in data from traffic sensors, from gunshot detection systems like ShotSpotters, and various other public data sources, all into a single centralized processing and analysis center. Now, the key insight here, as one source pointed out, is that while a single surveillance camera on its own might not seem that useful for tracking someone, having cameras all over the place that can track the movements of somebody throughout an entire city can be incredibly useful for law enforcement. It allows for this comprehensive, almost real-time tracking of individuals as they move through the urban landscape, creating a very detailed digital breadcrumb trail of their public movements.
Okay, so let's talk more about those automated license plate readers, the ALPRs. How pervasive are they really, and what exactly are they collecting beyond just the plate number itself?
ALPRs are truly ubiquitous now in many cities, and along major highways. They're everywhere. These devices are basically high-speed cameras coupled with optical character recognition software. They continuously photograph every single vehicle that passes within their view, You'll see them mounted on police patrol cars, fixed on street poles, bridges, sometimes even integrated into toll booths or traffic lights. And they capture not just the license plate number itself, but also the date, the exact time, and the precise GPS location of where that vehicle was spotted. Now, this means that data on completely innocent drivers is stored in a database somewhere, regardless of whether they are involved in any crime or under any kind of suspicion. What's more, this location data, this time-stamped record of where your car was, is often retained for months, sometimes even years, depending on the jurisdiction and the agency's policies. And this vast amount of data can be shared across multiple law enforcement agencies through things called fusion centers, and sometimes even with private companies that manage the databases. So this creates this massive searchable database of pretty much everyone's daily movements by car. It allows for retrospective tracking. For example, if a vehicle is later identified as being involved in an investigation, authorities can instantly pull up a map showing every location that specific car was spotted by an ALPR over an extended period, maybe weeks or months prior. The privacy concern here is pretty significant, right? Critics argue it allows for the mass surveillance of innocent citizens, creating a comprehensive record of their public movements without needing probable cause or a warrant for each individual lookup. It really blurs the lines between targeted investigation and just blanket monitoring of the entire population's travel patterns.
Right. And then there are systems like shot spotters. These seem designed to address a very specific public safety concern, detecting gunfire, but they also appear to come with their own set of controversies, particularly around privacy.
That's absolutely right. Shot spotters are essentially networks of acoustic sensors, microphones basically, strategically placed around a city, specifically designed to detect and pinpoint the location of gunfire. The way they generally work is, if 3 or more of these sensor devices register a loud bang, a potential sound event, simultaneously, that short audio recording is then immediately transmitted to a central processing center. There, a trained human technician listens to that audio clip and determines whether or not it's actually a gunshot or if it's something else like fireworks or maybe a car backfiring or construction noise. If it's confirmed as gunfire, that precise location information and the time is then rapidly dispatched to the local police department. The goal, ideally, is to reduce police response times to shootings and maybe increase accountability. And the primary justification for shot spotters is often to address the documented fact that even though gunfire can be a significant problem in many urban areas, people don't always call 911 when they hear a gunshot.
Right. People might be scared or just assume someone else called.
Exactly. Fear, apathy, the bystander effect, not wanting to get involved. There are many reasons. ShotSpotter aims to bridge that gap. However, this technology raises a pretty critical privacy question. Our sources indicate there have been at least 2 documented incidents in which audio of people's voices were caught in a recording. And that recorded audio was subsequently used actually in court cases against people involved in shooting incidents. This points to a significant potential privacy concern. While the system's intent is solely to detect the sound signature of gunshots, the always-on nature of the microphones means they can inadvertently capture and record ambient sounds, including conversations happening nearby on public streets. And that captured audio, even if accidental, can then potentially be used as evidence in legal proceedings, sometimes against the very people who were simply nearby, completely unaware their words were being recorded by the system. Critics argue this constitutes a potential invasion of privacy in public spaces, turning ordinary street conversations into potential evidence without consent or any prior suspicion related to those specific individuals.
So, okay, we have these visible systems like cameras and semi-visible ones like ALPRs and maybe shot spotter sensors if you know what to look for, but some surveillance technologies are even harder to spot, right? The ones that quietly intercept our most personal communications without leaving any visible signs at all. These are the truly invisible network interceptors, the ones that really feel like spy movie stuff.
That's exactly where devices like stingrays, or more broadly, EMS eye catchers, come into play. These are highly sophisticated, often portable devices. What they do is they imitate a cell tower. They basically broadcast a signal that's stronger than the legitimate carrier towers nearby, tricking your mobile phone, and potentially other phones in the immediate vicinity, into connecting to it instead of the real network. Once your phone is connected to the stingray, the device will then send metadata about that particular phone to that device, the stingray operator. The primary thing they do, and the main reason they're often used, is to precisely indicate that a particular phone was in a particular location at a particular time. They provide real-time location tracking that can be incredibly accurate, sometimes down to a specific room in a building, but their capabilities often extend beyond just grabbing location data.
Depending on the model and how they're used, they can also potentially intercept calls, extract text messages, SMS, and collect extensive metadata about communications. Things like who you called, who called you, when the call happened, and how long it lasted, even if they don't capture the content of the call itself. Now, the truly unsettling part is just how difficult they are to identify if you're just a member of the public. Unlike a normal cell tower, there's no obvious visible antenna or structure associated with a Stingray deployment. Our sources suggest that in places like New York City, if you happen to see those kind of big, like mobile command units parked somewhere, or maybe unmarked vans that seem to be lingering in an area for no apparent reason, that's perhaps the most likely spot where intercepted material might be collected or analyzed, as that's often where the Stingray devices are housed, or where the operators are monitoring the data coming in. The core insight here is that these devices are specifically designed to operate silently and invisibly in the background, making detection almost impossible for the average person just walking by. And if we connect this to the bigger picture again, being able to understand the specifics, what kinds of technologies are being used by whom and against whom, that understanding is really important for citizens to be able to effectively challenge their uses, push for greater transparency, demand oversight, and advocate for stricter legal controls.
Absolutely. And then there's the other invisible danger zone, the seemingly innocent, endlessly convenient world of public Wi-Fi. You know the scene. You're sitting in a coffee shop sipping your latte. You connect to the free Wi-Fi to quickly check your emails or browse the web. It looks completely harmless, right? It feels like a public service. But you're saying wrong. What are the hidden dangers really lurking in that seemingly open, free network?
Absolutely. Potentially wrong. That convenience of free at public Wi-Fi comes bundled with significant, often completely invisible, security risks. Every single unencrypted packet you send over that network, whether it contains your login passwords for websites, the content of your private chats, maybe even credit card numbers if you're shopping online, all of that can be captured by hackers using a simple tool called a Wi-Fi pineapple or a packet sniffer. Tools like Wireshark, for example, are freely available online and relatively easy to use. They allow anyone on the same network to promiscuously capture and display all the unencrypted network traffic flowing around them. This means if you're not using a secure encrypted connection, like if a website address doesn't start with HTTPS and show a padlock icon, or if an app isn't properly securing its data transmissions, everything you send and receive could potentially be visible in plain text to someone else sharing that same public Wi-Fi network. Hackers can also set up what are called evil twin networks. They create a fake Wi-Fi hotspot with a name that looks legitimate, like free coffee shop Wi-Fi, tricking you into connecting to their malicious network instead of the real one.
Oh, that's sneaky.
Very sneaky. Or they can perform man-in-the-middle attacks, where they position themselves between your device and the legitimate Wi-Fi router, allowing them to intercept, read, and even potentially alter your data as it flows back and forth. So the advice here is really clear and actionable. Always use VPN encryption when you're on public Wi-Fi. A virtual private network, or VPN, encrypts all your internet traffic. It creates this secure, scrambled tunnel between your device and the VPN server, and then out to the internet. This means that even if you're on an unsecure public network, anyone snooping on the traffic can only see gibberish, unreadable encrypted data, not your actual passwords or personal chats. And perhaps the simplest rule of thumb to remember, a really critical takeaway from our sources: if the network doesn't require a password to join, assume it isn't secure. This applies to pretty much any public place where you might find free Wi-Fi cafes, airports, hotels, libraries. The moment you connect to an open, unsecured network, you're essentially shouting your unencrypted data into the digital ether for potentially anyone nearby to pick up.
Okay. We've delved into the digital observers in our pockets, the ones in our living rooms, and the surveillance systems mapping our cities. Now, prepare yourself for perhaps the mind-bending and frankly pretty disorienting concept we're going to dive into today. What if I told you that your Wi-Fi signal, the very radio waves that power your home internet network, can literally see you, even through solid walls? This apparently isn't science fiction anymore. According to our sources, it's a new and increasingly accessible technique that lets attackers track your every move inside your home without ever stepping foot inside. How is that even possible?
Yeah, this is a truly significant and almost paradigm-shifting development in what some are calling the signals intelligence era of cybersecurity. It's using radio waves in a whole new way. The underlying scientific principle is actually deceptively simple, rooted in the basic physics of how electromagnetic waves behave. Wi-Fi is just a radio signal, right? An electromagnetic wave propagating through space. Much like sound waves or light waves, when a Wi-Fi signal encounters an object in a room, whether it's a solid wall, a piece of furniture, or crucially, a moving human body,
that signal is affected. It gets scattered, it gets refracted, bent, or it gets absorbed to some degree. If it's refracted or reflected, as one source put it, a portion of that signal comes back towards the source or other receivers. Now, what's utterly transformative here, the real breakthrough, is the advent of AI and cybersecurity, and the advent of AI in what I call signals intelligence. It's the AI that makes the difference. We can now build systems using readily available hardware that can see through walls by precisely measuring these incredibly subtle changes, these disturbances, in the Wi-Fi signal as it interacts with objects and people within a space. These systems work by continuously sending out Wi-Fi signals and then meticulously reading the bouncing and refracting radio waves that come back. With enough sophisticated intelligence built into the system, essentially advanced AI and machine learning algorithms, it's able to interpret these complex signal patterns and determine what is going on in that room. It can learn to differentiate between static objects like walls and furniture, which cause consistent reflections, and dynamic animate objects like people or even pets, which cause changing patterns as they move. It can even, astonishingly, get to the point where it can display the outlines of the body as it's moving in real time on a screen. So if you're walking around your living room, this technology, using just the Wi-Fi signals already present or generated by the attacker's device, could potentially render your moving form like a silent, ghostly shadow on a monitor without needing any cameras, without any microphones, without any physical intrusion whatsoever. It's like having an invisible, always-on radar system mapping your every movement inside your own home.
That's truly startling, just using Wi-Fi signals. So, okay, what does this mean in terms of accessibility then? Is this kind of technology purely in the realm of military-grade stuff, nation-state level capabilities that we're talking about, something only governments or maybe elite intelligence agencies could possibly deploy? Or is it something more widespread, more within reach for others?
And that, unfortunately, is perhaps the most alarming part of this whole development. This isn't restricted to military-grade budgets or nation-state actors anymore. Not at all. This kind of capability is now becoming possible, according to researchers and hackers demonstrating it, for potentially a home hobbyist budget. Now, the biggest single expense in setting up such a system typically is getting a specific type of video card, usually an NVIDIA GPU. That's because the necessary software, the AI processing part, often relies on CUDA, which is NVIDIA's proprietary platform for parallel computing. It's essential for handling the intensive AI calculations needed to interpret the Wi-Fi signals in real time. But beyond that specialized GPU, you primarily need an SDR, which stands for Software-Defined Radio. These are relatively low-cost devices now, often just a few $100s, sometimes even less. An SDR is basically a radio communication device where the components that are usually implemented in hardware, like mixers, filters, amplifiers, are instead implemented by means of software on a personal computer or embedded system. It gives you incredible flexibility. And then there's the truly game-changing element, the availability of open-source software like Denspose. Denspose is an AI system originally developed by researchers at Facebook AI Research, AFAIR, that takes these complex radio signal inputs, interprets the subtle distortions caused by human movement, and converts them into recognizable 2D or even 3D body forms or poses. So you combine a decent consumer-grade computer with the right GPU, an affordable SDR device, and this freely available open-source AI software. And it becomes entirely possible for someone, even a dedicated tech hobbyist working from their garage, to potentially build a device that can effectively see through walls using Wi-Fi. This fundamentally shifts the privacy landscape, doesn't it? Because this level of intimate surveillance is no longer limited to entities with massive resources or legal authority. It's potentially democratized in the worst way.
It certainly sounds exactly like something straight out of a spy movie, except now you're saying it's potentially a DIY project. So is it genuinely considered a spy device by those in the know? Or are there maybe other, more benign interpretations floating around?
Oh, it absolutely is a spy device. There's little ambiguity there among security professionals looking at its capabilities. The academic researchers who initially developed and demonstrated some of these techniques, understandably, tried to frame it primarily as a privacy issue that needs to be studied and addressed, maybe mitigated. But our sources, particularly those from the hacker and cybersecurity community, are pretty unequivocal. No, this is an anti-privacy issue. It goes beyond just being an issue. It's fundamentally a spy device by its very nature. And the prediction is stark. It will be used by law enforcement, it will be used by military intelligence, and chillingly, it will be used by bad guys. That seems almost inevitable. That's really the truth about any powerful new technology, isn't it? Its ultimate application depends entirely on the intent, the ethics, and the oversight of the user. However, it is important to understand the current limitations, which do offer some small comfort, for now at least. Wi-Fi power output is highly regulated in most of the industrialized world. In the US, for example, the FCC typically limits consumer Wi-Fi router power to between half a watt, 500 milliwatts, and 1 watt. This inherently limits the effective range of these Wi-Fi signals, usually to around 100 meters or less in typical indoor environments. This means that current consumer-level technology, using standard Wi-Fi power levels, can give you nice human figures. You can see clear outlines of bodies moving, but you can't really tell facial features or other fine details. The resolution just isn't there yet with standard Wi-Fi frequencies and power. However, and this is a crucial caveat, if we connect this to the bigger picture of technological potential, with higher frequency signals, you would get really good resolution. Using signals in higher frequency bands, like millimeter waves, could potentially yield incredibly detailed images, making it much more like an MRI of a room, as one expert described it. And importantly, these current limitations don't mean someone couldn't build a custom Wi-Fi device that deliberately puts out more power than legally allowed, or design a highly directional antenna, like a Yagi or parabolic dish, to focus the signal. Doing so could significantly enhance the device's ability to see further through walls, or perhaps achieve greater clarity and detail even with standard frequencies. So the current limitations seem largely due to existing regulatory constraints and the use of standard consumer hardware, not fundamental scientific barriers. This suggests that technology could become far more intrusive in the future if those factors change.
Okay, so given how incredibly powerful and potentially invasive this technology sounds, are there actually any beneficial applications for it? Or is it solely destined for these nefarious spying purposes we've been discussing? Are there any potential silver linings to this Wi-Fi third eye capability?
That's a really crucial question to ask, and yes, absolutely. Beyond the clear and concerning potential for malicious uses, there are indeed some compelling commercial and even humanitarian applications being actively developed based on this underlying Wi-Fi sensing technology. For instance, several companies are now building advanced home security systems that utilize this principle. These systems can accurately determine if there's a motion within the room that shouldn't be there. They work by learning the normal Wi-Fi signal patterns in a space, essentially taking a fingerprint of all of the people and devices usually in the room. So if a new person enters that space while the system is armed, it can detect that anomaly in the signal reflections. And these systems are becoming sophisticated enough, apparently, to differentiate with remarkable accuracy between, say, a person walking through a room versus just a family dog wandering around, or even something minor like a picture falling off the wall. They can distinguish between a genuine potential security emergency and a harmless event. Another application that's quite fascinating and potentially genuinely life-saving is using this technology for monitoring elderly individuals living alone. Using just the ambient Wi-Fi signals in their home, these systems can non-invasively track subtle movements, including things like breathing rates and even heart rates, by measuring the tiny chest movements associated with them. If the system detects that vital signs have varied significantly from a person's established safe baseline, or if it detects a pattern consistent with a sudden fall, a lack of micro movements after a larger motion, it can instantly trigger an emergency alert to caregivers or emergency services. This provides a potentially constant, unobtrusive way to help ensure safety and well-being for vulnerable individuals without requiring them to wear special monitoring devices or having cameras constantly watching them, which many find intrusive. So, while the privacy concerns associated with Wi-Fi sensing are absolutely significant and very real, the core technology itself does have broader potential utility that could genuinely benefit society in certain specific controlled contexts.
Okay, so we've explored the applications, both the potentially dark side and the potentially bright side. But for us, for the listener trying to navigate all this, what does this ultimately mean? How can we possibly protect ourselves from this kind of completely unseen surveillance where even the Wi-Fi signals floating through our homes can apparently be turned into a third eye that sees through walls? Are there any practical countermeasures available that aren't straight out of a spy thriller, like lining our walls with lead?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do we maintain privacy in this evolving digital landscape where even radio waves can be weaponized? When it comes to potential countermeasures against Wi-Fi sensing, we can consider a few different approaches, ranging from the relatively simple to the highly impractical for most people. On the simpler end, some sources suggest you could try turning down your Wi-Fi router's transmission power in its settings menu. Less power going out might mean weaker reflections coming back, though this is often pretty inconvenient, as it significantly limits your network's coverage area within your own home. You might create dead spots where you actually want a signal. You could also potentially opt for wired Ethernet connections instead of Wi-Fi wherever possible, especially for sensitive devices or in rooms where privacy is paramount. No Wi-Fi signal, no Wi-Fi sensing. Or maybe use Bluetooth for some short-range device connections, which is generally much lower power and shorter range than Wi-Fi, although it's also much slower for data transfer. Then you get into the realm of physical barriers. Placing dense objects like large metal filing cabinets or bookcases packed tightly with books strategically might help attenuate or block signals in certain directions. And having genuinely thick walls, like a building constructed with 10-inch concrete walls, would likely block or significantly degrade standard Wi-Fi signals, making this type of sensing much harder, if not impossible. For highly confidential facilities like government SCIFs, sensitive compartment and information facilities, they actually do use things like lead-lined walls or Faraday cages to completely prevent any electronic signals from getting in or out. But obviously that's not practical or desirable for the vast majority of homes or businesses.
Right, so no wrapping our entire houses in lead foil then. That's probably off the table for the average homeowner, I'm guessing.
Not for the average home, no. Probably not advisable. The best most of us might be able to do realistically is perhaps strategically turn down our router's signal power if the settings allow it, use wired connections more, or maybe be mindful of placing large, dense objects in areas where we want to create more of a dead zone for Wi-Fi signals passing through walls. Now, the other potential countermeasure you might hear discussed sometimes is jamming the signals. While jamming Wi-Fi signals is theoretically a possibility, it's actually not easy to do effectively, especially for modern Wi-Fi and Bluetooth standards. This is primarily because they use what's called spread spectrum technology. This means they don't just transmit on a single frequency, they rapidly skip through various frequencies across a wide band when sending a message. A message might start transmitting on one specific channel, then jump to a completely different channel for its next packet, then another, and so on, following a complex pattern. To effectively jam this kind of frequency hopping signal, a jammer would need to know, or guess, the complex, often pseudo-random algorithm that determines which frequency the transmitter is going to be on at any given millisecond. This makes it incredibly difficult to predict and effectively block the entire transmission, as predicting randomness is difficult, as one source very eloquently put it. You'd have to blast noise across the entire frequency band, which is often illegal and disruptive. While some simpler protocols like Bluetooth Low Energy might be pretty easy to break or jam due to simpler hopping patterns, standard Wi-Fi is generally considered a little bit more difficult because there's an element of randomness, or at least complexity, in its frequency hopping algorithms. And this whole situation, this constant evolution of threats, like researchers demonstrating a neighbor attack, where adversaries could potentially use a compromised system's Wi-Fi signals to attack or surveil a nearby target, it just highlights the ongoing need for awareness, education, and vigilance in cybersecurity. There isn't likely to be a single, magical technological solution or countermeasure. It's more about understanding the risks and making informed choices.
It really does feel like we're just scratching the surface here, just at the beginning of understanding the full implications of this kind of invisible sensing technology.
It absolutely does feel that way. And you have to ask, if this level of surveillance, this ability to literally see through walls using common radio signals, combined with increasingly accessible AI, if that's now potentially within reach of home hobbyists, what does that truly mean for the future landscape of privacy, not just in our homes, but in public spaces and workplaces? This combination of radio signal analysis and advanced AI represents, as some have said, a potential game-changing technology for spies, and unfortunately for criminals and other bad actors as well. And if we try to connect this to an even bigger picture, think about the broader AI revolution itself. We know it is going to suck up a huge amount of energy. We see evidence of this already, with companies like Microsoft apparently looking into buying or building nuclear power plants just to power their massive AI data centers. How does this insatiable demand for computing power, driven largely by AI development, further change the complex equation of technology versus privacy? This immense processing capability will undoubtedly drive the development of even more sophisticated, even more data-hungry surveillance technologies, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's technically possible and consequently what we consider private. These are really critical, maybe even existential considerations for how we as individuals and as a society choose to navigate our increasingly connected and potentially our increasingly observed world. #TechTag outro.
So we've taken a truly deep dive today, haven't we? We've gone from the everyday devices right there in your hand and in your home to the pervasive public infrastructure that's constantly mapping your movements in the city, and even into this really strange territory of invisible signals that can apparently see right through your walls.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot to process and certainly a lot to think about as you just go about your day interacting with all this technology.
It is indeed. And I think what becomes abundantly clear when you look across all our sources is this fundamental shift in how we need to think about privacy. We often equate privacy with, locked doors or maybe strong passwords online, but the reality in, say, 2025 and beyond seems to be that privacy is something you have to actively fight to keep. And this isn't about trying to foster paranoia or make everyone constantly anxious. It's more about recognizing what some call the new baseline of digital existence. It's just the reality we inhabit now. We've willingly, often eagerly, bought convenience, feature by feature, smart device by smart device. We love the ease it brings. But what we've really gotten often bundled silently in the background without us fully realizing it is a network of quiet observers, each one logging, syncing, transmitting little pieces of our lives. It fundamentally challenges our traditional, maybe outdated notions of what actually constitutes private space in a world that's so deeply interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we continue to build this world of smart, interconnected things, a world where our very homes are increasingly becoming data collectors themselves, this really raises an important and maybe ongoing question for you, our listener. If pretty much every device around you can potentially be a quiet observer, and if even the air we breathe, filled with radio signals, carries information that can now be read and interpreted, how do we even begin to redefine what private space means in our homes, in our workplaces, in our lives? What does true digital literacy and personal autonomy actually look like when the very walls around us and even the Wi-Fi signals flowing silently through them seem to have developed eyes and ears? It's definitely a question worth continually asking ourselves as technology inevitably marches forward.